Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining Mike Caston and myself, Pete Abrahamson, for another completely unscripted chat about mental health and well-being in the legal profession. Today, we thought we'd talk about something we haven't done for a long time, which is people running their own practice, a solo law practice. It's very common to work in a law firm or an in-house counsel, but there's a lot of people out there running their businesses on their own. And I got to think about that because I spoke to a lawyer recently who said she started her own business. It was either that or leaving the legal profession altogether. I said, well, why was that? Well, she was so unappreciated at work that she wondered why she was there in the first place. And she walked out and started her own business. Um, I have my own business. I designed it that way. That's what I worked towards getting, but she jumped for it. And I think that's a very dangerous way of starting your own business.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting topic, and of course, I work at a mid-sized law firm, and I've worked at large law firms, and I've worked at boutique law firms. Um, I've never gone on my own or started a small practice, although I thought about it at some junctures. But I do have some family members. I have some lawyers in the family, but my mom is an immigration lawyer. My sister works with her also as an immigration lawyer, and she has her own practice and has run her own practice for as long as I can remember. And I think it's right. There's a host of issues, both pros and cons, I think, that come with running your own practice. And I think anyone who's a small business owner or a business owner, knows some of those issues. I think some of them are just specific to that, and some of them are, I think, issues that are particular to being a lawyer, and some of the conditions and mental health issues we've been talking about in our conversations. But I think it's a really interesting topic to talk about.
Yes, when we start our own business, I know that from a counseling and coaching business, I'm good at what I do, and the lawyer who goes solo is good at what he or she does. And then we have the sales, the marketing, the finance, the IT, everything else suddenly piles on top of you. And you can feel very, very useless that, oh, I should know this stuff, but I don't. And all the admin takes up so much time that you wouldn't believe it. And I know some people simply can't cope with that pressure. And there's another thing, which I know you and I have talked about in the past, and that's loneliness. When you have your own business, everything is on you, and usually there's not an awful lot of other people around you can talk to.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And, I think that the appeal of running your own business is, especially if you feel like, it gives you control. And I think that a lot of people in large firms, that's very appealing, right? I can sort of control my own life and control my own hours and control what I work on. And while that's true, it also, there's this sort of host of factors that come into play of, well, now I have to do, billing myself, and I have to set up a computer system by myself and figure out real estate by myself and figure out payroll and employment issues. And it is hard. I think a lot of us as lawyers just in law firms feel like, there's the substantive doing the law part, and then there are all these other things. But I think with running your own business, those other things, are even more emphasized because it is all on you. And I think the issue that comes up, I remember talking to my mom, during COVID, and she runs, she has a maybe 14, 15 person practice, paralegals and assistants and some lawyers. And just being out running that remotely and managing all those people was orders of magnitude more complicated and stressful. And I think one of the issues that comes up, like you said, you mentioned loneliness, but it's also like many of us in our job feel like, oh, if I don't get this done, it's all on me. But the reality is, within law firms, if we're doing it right, there is a safety net and a structure and other people who could do your work if you had to take some time or step out or something else came up. But I think that feeling is more true and more legitimate when you are running a smaller solo practice, right? Like if I have to take a day here, or who's gonna step in. I think that does introduce a different issue, a different and more complicated issue than we deal with in larger firms.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And people work their socks off. They work extremely long hours, and they work the weekends, and then they work some more, which they also did in the law practice. but hated it. So now they've gone and done it for themselves, especially at the startup phase where you're not established yet, where everything just has to be done and it has to be done by you. But it does take a toll, because if you have a family perhaps, or you have friends that you would like to see just now and again, and if you're all consumed by work, some people do find it very difficult to see that there's anything other than work, work, work. And it starts playing on their mind. They're getting depressed, a little bit anxious. What's the whole point? Why am I just working? It's all work and no fun. And that can happen when you are a solo practice.
Yeah, and I gotta say, oh, sorry, go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, until you get to the point where other things fall into place, then you get a bit of a breathing space.
Yeah, but I think if you're not really intentional about it, those same issues of boundaries and work-life balance, they can not be solved, and in fact get even worse, when you're solo. And I know, it's interesting. I was speaking with a woman who had a small practice that she ran out in the Midwest. And she told me, she said, it's funny, I would talk to colleagues, at big law firms, and I would talk about work-life balance and burnout. She said, but then in my own life, running this practice, I was like, well, that's not me. I have to run like crazy to do this, and it's my own practice. And I think, you see it with entrepreneurs and business owners. I think it's even harder to you have to be really, really work hard to create that balance, or else you're always on, like literally.
I think why we don't burn out as quickly as we do when we're employed by somebody else is that we have the enjoyment of being our own master, our own employer. What we do for our own sake. We're not feeding somebody else's dream or luxury, whatever it is. So long hours in themselves do not lead to burnout. It's when we hate what we do during those long hours. But the body still needs a rest. So we can't just ignore things. I like what I'm doing. I'm just going to go 24/7. We can't do that. So we do need to understand that working in your own business, having your own business, comes with a lot of benefits, but also with some challenges.
Yeah, and I've been interested in learning from some of the small business owners and having some of those conversations. And specifically in the area of mental health, I know that I know of some kind of progressive programs where they come together in community to support each other.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a law firm, but if someone, and it's complicated, but if for example I do get sick or have an issue, knowing that someone else has your back is something you have to kind of build. You have to build in those processes. So I still think community is really important, even if you're running your own business.
It is, and I think we need to have two different types of community, or be able to talk to people about different things, because you've got the professional community where you can discuss legal cases in your case, and psychological cases for me, but you also need to talk about things other than business. So I think it's important that we have this distraction from our professional life, that we can talk about something completely different. It could be sport, it could be, you name it. Help out at a charity, anything you can do to see other people and to talk to people about things other than your profession. Because if you do lawyering, Monday to Friday and weekends, and you talk only to lawyers about lawyer stuff, what's going to inspire you to go back to work? We need the spare time to inspire us to go back to work, and we need the work to want us to go and do something different as well. So we become a full circle person.
Yeah, it's funny you just said. I was just thinking, like, it's about being like a whole person, and I think it's interesting. I found some groups that I've participated in. Like there's a group that meets every month called the Lawyers Depression Project, and the people who join those, it's run on Zoom. But the people who join those calls are all lawyers, so we have similar problems and we can relate to each other. But we're not necessarily, we're talking about life too. So I think it is important, like I said, loneliness, and I think community is really important. And the issue of loneliness, we are social creatures, whether we're doing business or during the time that we're not doing business. So I think it's so important, sort of mentally, and it's also important it does integrate with business, because I mean, I think you do need that community. It can be helpful, so helpful professionally. So I think that is an important issue for solo practices. And I do go back to what you said, it's not only about long hours, it's about feeling fulfilled in your work and having control and agency. And those things can, counteract burnout. But I have seen it. I mean, I do see people who are working to the point, of exhaustion. And I think we've all experienced during this COVID period, like it's hard to turn off, especially if we're working from home. And I think that's very true for people who own their own businesses. It's hard to turn off.
And I just think one last thing we could discuss today, Mike, is this sense and need for community, and COVID and lockdown, this whole thing we've all been through for a couple of years. There are two different types of seeing each other and having community. One is online, like you and I do right now, and then there's the in-person thing. I much prefer in-person. I think you have a different type of community and sense of talking to each other when it's real in-person, face-to-face, instead of the online face-to-face. Just wanted quickly to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I definitely agree, but I also have, in these past few years, especially, I guess it accelerated, the use of online meetings. And, I don't take for granted the fact that, you and I have never met in person, but we have a friendship and relationship and the ability to do this together. So it does open up this whole new world of potential relationships that can be, I think, very interesting and fulfilling. But I think it is also important, it is different. In person is still different, even though the technology is pretty good, just because I think it provides for like a more organic kind of experience. Like you're not just going to come on and talk about this thing for 15 minutes and then say goodbye. Like if you go to the office or you go to a meeting and you see people, you talk about their lives, like it is definitely different.
It's totally different dynamic, which we can't recreate in the same way online when we have little pictures of a lot of people in front of us. Mike, I think we should let the poor people who've had a break now go back and do some work, and say thank you for watching, and let us have your comments as usual. It's been a pleasure talking to you again, Mike, and we shall do that again sometime soon. Take care.
Absolutely.
Bye for now.